am actually really excited about the next bit of presentation because I saw it already once. I've been a grant recipient, I've been on review panels, but I'm not sure I've ever had the opportunity to sit with the funder and really go in such beautiful depth and detail to make sure I had what I needed. And so I'm super glad about the next time on our agenda for Ben is going to take you through that. Ben is also going to invite you to ask questions. He may ask you from time to time to hold your question because he'll be covering that content later. So just stay with us. Yeah. All right, it's all yours.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's take this, let me get this two more. Thank you. Can everybody hear me? Okay, I can't tell if this is picking up or not, so I'm just gonna project.
Why don't you put it more over here?
Okay, yeah. How's this? Is this any better?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you again, everybody. I'm really delighted to see all of you here. The one thing we didn't say this morning is those of us on staff feel like we got to know you months ago. We got to read why you wanted to be an artist. We got to read your connections to communities. We got to read what you dream about and how you see your work. And mostly we got to sample your delicious and fantastic and rich and juicy work samples. So it's just a treat for us to see you all here face to face and be with you today. As you'll notice, even though she was very generous, before the break, Sydney was talking about the tax guide and how great it was and there wasn't enough time. She did not say that about me. This is potentially interminable, painful, and like watching paint dry. But this really is the mechanics of how you fill out forms and what you ask for money for, etc. And so I hope you'll just bear with me because we figured an investment now ahead of time will just make everything easier and faster for you going forward. There's a lot of information to cover, so I'm going to go through information in a big sort of bleh, and then I will stop and say what kind of questions do we have, because my primary goal is to make sure you're clear on every major idea before we move on to the next one. But I hope you'll allow me to just bleh before we stop with the questions. So, okay, what we're going to go over now, first of all, is the grant mechanics, which is going to include, first of all, the plan and the grant agreement, scheduling payments, and your reports, all of which you're going to find in tab 2 in your book. This is all about the $40,000 that's coming directly to you. This is not going to an organization, this is coming to you. You're going to submit a plan for it, you're going to determine the schedule for it, you're going to report on it, and you're going to be responsible for a final report. If you turn to page, 59, boy, that went really fast. If you turn to 59 in your book, you'll see a form that looks like this, called Jerome Hill Artist Fellowship Plan and Budget. You'll see it at the top of the page. I'm going to be enlarging boxes on the screen like I did here to call your attention to things, so yours won't have page 59 on it that way, but that's where you'll find it. And I hope this disconnect between what you see in the book and what you see on the screen will actually be helpful, not disorienting. As we've said, so the first question is, why do we even ask for a plan? You'll remember that when we first made your phone calls and subsequently, we have never really referred to you as grantees yet. We've referred to you as grant designates. The reason for that is the Internal Revenue Service requires us, before we can confirm you as a grant, to confirm that we have reviewed a plan and a budget from you that shows what you're going to do is in line with our charitable objectives. The grant that you've received is really designed to support 3 things for you, which you'll see in the far left column, which I've blown up here under goals. That is either to create new work, and or to develop your artistic skills, and or to develop your professional and career skills. Everything in your plan has to relate to one or more of these 3 goals. Now you can spend your effort entirely on one goal. You can say, all I'm going to do is make new work, and that's great. You can choose any 2 of these to split your time over. You can go for all 3. But if you can't relate something directly to one of these 3 goals, we're not going to be able to support it. The central column that you'll see here, and I've drawn a large yellow arrow over it, is called Projects and Activities. And this, of course, is when you're going to tell us what you plan to do to define your projects and activities. In the first horizontal band, called Creation of New Work, for example, you might tell us, well, I'm going to rehearse, or I'm going to perform, I'm going to exhibit, or publish, or write, or film, or sculpt, or more. But this is also the place you would tell us about, even before I go into the rehearsal hall, I'm going to do research, I'm going to interview people, I'm going to the library, I'm going to do location scouting if I'm a filmmaker, I'm casting, I'm going to find the rehearsal space. This horizontal band is everything and all the stages you need to do in order to make a new work and deliver it to the audience or the public. In this horizontal band called artistic development, you would tell us about things that would enhance your professional artistic skill set. You'd say, I'm going to engage a mentor to teach me new technique. I'm going to travel to another country to witness or study other cultural traditions. I'm going to enroll in a program designed to teach me a new methodology. I might even decide I've always wanted to learn to play the saxophone. I've never done that. I'm going to learn to play the sax. These are things around developing your artistic vocabulary and your reach, but that are not connected to a specific piece of work, at least not yet. They could pay off later, but not at the present time. And in the third horizontal band, career development, this is where you would tell us, I'm going to a conference to expand my professional network. I'm going to redesign my website. I'm going to meet with agents. I'm going to attend a skill development class to learn about accounting or tax laws. These are things that will enhance your career trajectory in non-artistic ways. In addition to telling us what you're going to do, we ask you to tell us when you're going to do it. In this column to the left marks projected time frame, and I've highlighted it with a blue arrow. If you know specific dates, that's great, and they're to be encouraged, but you might not know them yet, and therefore you may give a more general forecast. You might say, well, I'm going to go into rehearsal in the first quarter of the year, and that's fine. This is a good exercise, though, to chart relative time blocks just to make sure you're not trying to do too much in too condensed a period of time. One thing to say, which you'll see at the bottom, is all of the components of your plan, all the time you spend, all the things you buy that you tell us in this plan, you have to finish 12 months after your final payment, or no later than April 1st, 2022, whichever is earlier. And I'm going to come back to that. This final date is going to make more sense to you when we get to payment schedules. So I'm going to come back to that. But you've got till April 1st, 2022 to actually do everything you're telling us you're going to do. In most grant programs, having gone from projects and activities to projected time frame, you'd actually probably jump here to the supported costs where you're going to itemize where you plan to spend the money. We're actually going to urge you not to do that. We're going to actually urge you to go one other column to the left. To this one, marked projected time commitment. The column between the projects and activities and the supported costs. And I'll tell you why. Unlike many project grants where funds are tied primarily or exclusively to materials or expenses, this fellowship supports your time and energy. Essentially, this grant allows us to say, you're going to spend time in a studio making work, and we believe you should be compensated for that. You're going to spend time writing, and we think you should be compensated for that. We think if you're scouting location as a filmmaker, we think you should be compensated for that. You should be compensated for the time you're spending with a mentor or with marketeers to develop your website. The time you spend in growing as an artist or in making new work or in developing in your career has value, and we want to recognize that value and pay you for it. So having asked yourself in projects and activities what you want to do, you'll now have to ask yourself 3 questions. First of all, how much time am I going to spend toward these activities? In the next 2 to 3 years, how much time am I going to spend? Now, many of you think in very different ways about how to measure time. I know writers, for example, who say, every morning when I wake up, I'm going to write for an hour with my first cup of coffee, and on weekends I'm going to write for 5 hours one day, and then I'm going to take a day off. If that's how you measure your time, hourly logs are going to be very easy for you, and you can think of this time column in terms of hours. Others of you, however, may think in terms of day rates. A film director, for example, might have a day rate to shoot a commercial. Or theater directors may say, I think in terms of 6 weeks of rehearsal. Or others may think, I'm going to make a 3-month residency somewhere. Whatever the time frame is you use and you feel most appropriate is how you should conceive of and fill out this column, only making sure that you're comparing apples to apples. What I mean by that is, maybe you have another job on the side designing websites. If you're asking us for time that you're spending to direct a film, based it on your day rate for directing, not on your day work for website design. Okay, so you're making a parallel comparison. The second question you need to ask yourself is, what value do I place on my time? There is not, I wish there were one easy, one-size-fits-all to determine what an artist's time is worth. When people ask this question, some may say, well, I'm going to look at what minimum wage is. Other people may say, I'm going to look at median household income where I live. Others of you may know this thing called the working artist and the greater economy, aka wage outlines, which are about compensation for artists. Some of you may say, well, if I were teaching at a university at a full-time faculty, this is what I make, and I'm going to benchmark myself against that. Others of you might have union scale that's relevant, or there may be other indicators. And to make this even more complicated, we know that artist compensation is impacted by where you live, the number of years you're in the field, whether you've got an advanced degree, and a lot more. We're not insisting on a single definition of how you determine this. What we basically believe is there's value beyond the grant in just helping you think about, in a realistic way, how much time do I spend doing this and how much is my time worth? Per our needs, we need to make sure that whatever you figure out is called reasonable and defensible, a phrase you're going to hear from me more than once, but reasonable and defensible. So if you say, I'm going to work for 1 hour and that's my whole $20,000, we're probably going to push back and say, okay, you're going to just need to unpack that a little bit because we need to understand how you got there. But we're not going to mandate one set of standards. We just need to make sure it's reasonable and defensible. And then the third question you need to ask is, how much of my time that I'm going to spend is uncompensated and should be supported by my grant? Now, one thing you cannot do with this grant is called double dipping. You can't ask us to pay for costs fully paid for by another source, including grants, commissions, and salaries. So if a dance company is paying you a salary for rehearsal time to create a new piece, you cannot also ask us to cover the rehearsal time salary. If, however, you've agreed to do a dance piece for a small group and they have only a token honorarium they can offer you, you can say basically what's the difference between that honorarium and what reasonable compensation for rehearsal would be, and we can address that gap. This is also a time that you can say, I have a job, my job is supporting my time, but actually I'm going to take leave from my job, and then that time becomes uncompensated and we can support you for it. But as long as someone's giving you a check for time, we can't give you a check for the same time. I'm going to pause right here before I go on to look more concretely at this, but I know I've gone as a first start. Everybody with me so far, or do I need to go back, or anything not clear so far?
Can I
Yes, please. I'm sorry, Simon? Yeah.
What happens if you get like, say that you say that you need money for something, and you get like another grant down the road for that same thing?
Yes. The question is, what if I say I'm going to use your money for something and then I get a subsequent grant that covers what I've told you I'm going to cover? You'll see when we get a little further, there's a progress report. Your plans do not lock you in stone. They can be revised and adjusted with the passage of time. And so we have a built-in, and if it happens really in your second phase, you can call us and we can say, what adjustment or changes can we make to find other things to support for you now that somebody else is supporting what we were supporting. Does that help?
Yeah.
There was was somebody down here?
It's okay, I have an answer already.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Now, so to be concrete, I think people will be surprised to see how quickly the time may go. You know, if you've read the books around visual arts painters, for example, there's a report that I read where there was a painter who said, look, I've structured my life. I teach on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which means Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, I'm in the studio for 8 hours a day. And then I take 1 day off. I take 1 day in the weekend and I paint 1 day sometimes. I even take a whole month off. Using that equation, that painter would have more than 1,000 hours, and at $20 an hour, that's her whole $20,000 first installment. Or you might find like this fictitious theater director who says, I'm doing 2 productions in a row, and who says basically, I figure I'm going to spend 18 weeks creating new work. I put a value of $14,000 on that. I'm going to spend about 6 weeks developing artistic skills. I'm going to value that at $5,000. I'm going to spend 1 week or 9 days at $1,000. And this combination of These three things would basically total up to that artist $20,000. If this is your situation, if you can account for the whole $20,000 by your time, your budget is complete and there is no need to fill in any supported costs in the supported column about what you're going to spend it on. If you can account for the whole thing with time, this is about all you need to fill in. Now, all the vertical columns need to be filled in, so they're blank here, but that's all you need to do. Now, the great thing about our buying your time is that essentially you are earning this income. We're supporting you, for example, to write for 1,000 hours or to pay for 1,000 hours if you said $20 an hour. And when you're done, you've earned it. And just like a salary at a job, we don't need to know where you spend it or on what you spend it or when you spend it. In fact, just like I get a paycheck, my boss doesn't say, you can't save this, or you have to spend it next week, or I have that latitude. And if you're basing your budget in time, you might spend it not only for professional reasons, which you might spend it for personal, or you might decide not to spend it and to save it and to give yourself a cushion for years 3 and 4 when this grant is over and suddenly you've got a more predictable income. On the other hand, we recognize that many of you are lucky enough to have a lot of other obligations. And that you might say, for example, I have a full-time job, or I have that's already paying me, or I have demands on my personal life, and my time alone doesn't account for my full allocation. Like this fictitious fellow, you might find that you're only accruing $11,000 to create new work, $2,000 in time for artistic development, and you're not spending any time on career development at all. Because we need to be sure that our funds are supporting allowable charitable costs, if your time does not total your $20,000, then you need to show us more specific line items in this column called supported costs. This is the place where you show us not the total cost of the project you're doing, but the cost you are asking us to support. That's a big difference. So I'm going to say that again. You don't need to show us the total cost of what you're doing. You show us the cost you are asking us to support. So for example, if you're making a huge scale dance work over 2 years, you may be hiring collaborators and renting a space and marketing and engaging management and touring and more, and that could be more than your $40,000 over 2 years. This supported column doesn't say show us the whole $74,000 budget. It says within your bigger budget, what are the $40,000 worth of expenses that you asked Jerome to support? This supported column has a number of standardized lines, and they include things like transportation, lodging, and per diem, rental costs for studios, space, equipment, materials, tuition to enroll in a program or take a class, registration, if you're going to enter a film festival, for example, collaborator fees, even childcare. For those of you who have children, paying somebody to watch your kids while you're in the studio is a legitimate experience. It also has a section called Other, highlighted in pink here, where if there are additional costs that you can't fit into one of these boxes, you can put them in Other in that expandable section as well. Only remembering that they all have to tie back to those 3 goals on the left-hand column. Now, things like materials for costumes, studio rental, payments for collaborators, software and computers if you're a writer, canvas and paint if you're a painter. These are things that are all easy examples of things you need to create work. Childcare costs, as I've said before, can be legitimate. That said, putting a down payment down on a house or saving for retirement, as worthy as these goals are, can't be supported indirectly in the enumerated costs in the right-hand column. So for the artists that we looked at before with only $13,000 worth of time, it's the combination of time and expenses that get them to the $20,000. So that artist didn't give up the time, didn't say because I didn't have enough I can't use time. They're saying now my $11,000 of time is expanded by another $5,500 I'm going to spend on transportation, lodging, per diem, equipment, and collaborator fees. That $2,000 in artistic development is now going to be enhanced by $1,500 in enrollment fees, giving me a new total of $16,500 in creating work, $3,500 in artistic development, getting me my $20,000 for my first installment. Oh, there's somebody coming? Yes.
Just to clarify.
Please.
So if we are the scenario where it's 1,000 hours logged in, and we can say, look, my time is worth $20 an hour.
Yep.
20,000.
Yep.
And we don't even have to bother with the right-hand column.
You will, if you're doing time, you will tell us, first of all, in the projects and activities, what you're gonna do. So I'm gonna lock myself away and write, and I'm going to meet with a publisher, and I'm going to meet with illustrators for my books. In the left-hand column, you'll tell us when I'm gonna do it. Okay, I'm gonna write for the next 3 quarters, I'm gonna meet with my agent in January of 2021, I think, whatever that relative time frame is. And then in the projected time commitment, you're gonna tell us roughly how much on each of those things I'm gonna do. I'm gonna write for 900 hours, I'm gonna meet with agents for 10 hours, whatever. So you'll fill out the vertical columns, but when you get to the right-hand column, all you'll do is the roll-up of the equivalent of the 11, the 2, and the 0. You don't need to do any single line, because you're earning the time we don't need to know if you spend it on transportation or plane or whatever. Okay.
I'm gonna go check on that cut.
That's not a problem. I can dance the presentation, even though those of you who are dancers will be appalled and know why. You know, it was like, remember the worst thing growing up was you'd watch your parents try to dance to your music? Wasn't that like the most mortifying thing? As an almost 70-year-old man, I can help you relive that mortification. Yeah. La Bruja.
If we want to say, if we're developing an art space, what category, like for a roof for that space, like where does that fall?
Space and equipment.
Space and equipment?
Yep.
And
you would then basically talk about, is that around development? You'd have to make a choice about whether you want to put that in as I'm making new work, or as I'm developing my artistic skills, or as I'm developing my career. And you might decide that you're going to parse it out over all 3 because your use of the space will change. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions on this? Yeah, please.
So it's either we're earning the money or the money is funding the work.
It's either you are asking us to support your time and energy, and that's what I'd say, you're earning it, because if you say, I'm going to write for 1,000 hours, and we're saying basically we believe we should support that, you're sort of earning that money by the use of your time. Or you're going to say, I want to purchase things, I want to spend money on plane tickets or whatever, or a combination of the 2. This artist is saying, I've got $11,000 worth of time and $5,500 of expenses, and that gives my creating new work a total of $16,500. So, and indeed, you actually just gave me the perfect segue. Because the decision you make about dedicating your grant entirely to supporting your time, or to supporting costs, or splitting the grant between the 2, doesn't change the amount we're going to send you. We don't pay your vendors directly. We are still going to send you $40,000 over the 2 chunks of time that you'll learn more about in a minute. So it's not like, oh, if you articulate supported costs, we're going to send you less and send money off to Sony for your camera or whatever. No, you still get the money and have to spend it those ways. In filling out your budget, as I've said before, you need to fill out every column, but the other thing I would say to you is, don't worry about being hyper granular. Remember that example I gave you about the previous theater artist? Notice that she's divided her time in 3 big chunks. So she said basically, in pre-production, that's going to include for me research and casting and design meetings and search for space and preliminary workshops and more, and I think, that's going to take me 6 weeks. And my rehearsal and opening, that's going to take me 8 weeks, and my post-operating, which includes, post-opening rather, including panels and documentation, that's going to take me about 6 days. So you're thinking in broad overview strokes as you provide that to us. That said, we don't need you to say, oh, well, it's 8 hours looking for a space, I'm going to spend 14 hours in casting, I'm going to spend 83 hours at the library. We don't need to see that. But, as you'll see, oops, on page 61, these go really back. Somehow I got way over. Okay, there. On page 61, there's a worksheet. Now this worksheet for you is actually more detailed than what we're asking you for in the budget, and this is a tool for you. We don't ask to see it, you will not give it to us, and you should use it if you find it useful. You'll see, for example, it's got even more granular breakouts of actions and time commitment per project, and the budget sheet asks you to roll that up. That said, if this is useful to you, it's a helpful way to make sure that you're not forgetting about critical stages and you don't inadvertently overextend yourself either financially or in terms of your time. So again, it's a tool for you. It's not a fill this out and send for us. So again, this is page 61 of your book. Now, because your grant is a 2-year grant, first of all, you're going to see back on page 59, this form, which is, you'll see in the very faint blue up at the top, it's called Part 1 for the first $20,000, and it's followed on page 60 by an identical form, but it says Part 2, second $20,000. Now, this is your composite budget form, Part 1 and Part 2. Now, some of you might know, I already know what's going to happen over the next 2 years. I am going to give a useful shape to this. I know I'm going to be developing work. I'm going to be in the studio alone for the next 10 months. I'm going to rehearse over 2 months, and I'm going to tour for 6 months, and then I'm going to start new work on the months after that. Declaring the project for the second year may be a great way to give a shape to your journey with us in a way, but it does not lock you in. So if you fill out parts 1 and 2 at the outset, you will have a chance to change part 2 or adjust. Others of you might say to us, wait. Look, I'm planning in year 1 to do research and travel with the first 20,000, and what I'm going to do on the second year depends on what I learned in the first year. How can I possibly know what I'm going to do? We hear that. So don't feel compelled to fill out the plan for the second 20,000 when you submit your first plan. Just write to be determined or to be provided later when that first plan comes along, knowing that before you get the second 20,000, you're going to have to fill all that out and tell us, and we're going to have to approve it. But if you don't know it at the outset, don't spend a lot of time making it up just for us. Tell us how much you know for the first 20,000. Again, if you know more, feel free to say. So as a quick summary, I want to just say before we go over the timeline, ultimately what we hope in the planning is that you'll be thoughtful, you'll be deliberate, you'll be intentional, but this won't be oppressive in terms of your time and energy, okay? So we're trying to thread that in a lot of ways. We're asking for overview, but encouraging you to think more specifically, and also the way we're saying, tell us the first year, feel free to tell us the second, but don't feel like you have to if you don't know it. So in a quick overview then, the timeline looks like this. First of all, this is going really fast today. First of all, you submit the plan to, oh God. I swear, this is like hyper-triggered. Okay, first of all, you submit the plan to us. The next thing that happens is the staff reviews the plan. We ask you questions, we come back to you, we might push you back for changes. If you did say 20,000 for that 1 hour, this is when we say, let's unpack that a little bit, please. Depending on when you send us the form, and depending what else we've got going on, if our board meeting's the next week, we're probably frantic and it's not going to happen right away. But this could take us anywhere from a week to a month. So just know in that planning, you need to give yourself that latitude of time. The next thing that happens is the staff approves the plan and we issue your grant contract. When you sign your grant contract and we have signed the grant contract, then and only then, it's a grant. It's like you put the big stork with the bundle out in front of your apartment and say, it's a grant. And at that point, Yahoo, money begins to flow, depending on when you've told us. That's the basic timeline. A couple things we'd say. First of all, submit your plan as soon as you are ready, even if you don't want your first payment for a while. Because remember, it's better for you and for us, but also remember, we cannot pay for costs you have incurred or activities you have done before your grant contract is signed. The day you sign the contract is the day the clock begins to tick on what you can ask us to support. So if you're already paying a dancer for dance rehearsals 2 weeks ago, we can't help you. But if you sign it as of June 1st, going forward, then we can pay you, okay? We're good so far?
Yes.
Which brings us to the second topic, payment schedules. When do I get my money? I'm going to ask you to sort of split yourself in two and to think on two complementary time frames at work here. First of all, as I said before, we will pay you all your funds, and I'm going to come back to this in a minute, and this is not in the book, so you don't need to look for it. We're going to pay you everything before April 30th of 2021. That's because essentially we can give you money up front. Sorry. The second is, though, you have 1 year after your final payment or by April 2022 to complete your plan. The reason we do this is essentially we're fronting you the cash to do what you tell us you want to do. We're not asking you for your cash flow. Go out and spend $20,000 and then we're going to reimburse you. So if we buy the plan, we're going to say, here's your 20, go do it, and you have until you have a year later to spend your $20,000. What this is important to remember, though, is that this means you could get a payment in 2021 and not spend it until 2022. And the difference in this is important to remember because your fellowships are taxable income. Any income you get in a calendar year that is not offset by business expenses is considered net personal income and is taxable. Now, you're going to have a tax person this afternoon, and Signy's right. There'll be a lot of questions, and I'm not a tax expert, so I'm just laying out the broad scheme. So as a general rule, knowing everybody's situations are different, and you may have personal reasons to think differently about this, but as a general rule, I would say probably you want the money for your scheduled payments, that far right column, to be in the same year you're going to pay them. So if you said, I want $500 for a plane ticket, you probably want that $500 to land in your account in the same calendar year you're going to buy it. And if you oversleep on New Year's Eve because you've had too much to drink and you buy the ticket January 2nd and you got it the previous year, the government's not going to like it. So you probably want those supported costs to come in the same year you're going to spend them. Where you're going to have to think more is with the money you've earned by fulfilling the time request in your plan that I compared earlier to the salary, because again, you have the discretion of where and when and on what to spend it. You might say, I'm going to do all time, I want it this year because I have so many other business expenses that aren't supported, it's going to offset it and I'm not going to be in a problem. Others of you may choose to say, I'm going to spend it on personal expenses, or I'm going to save it, remember that save it, and I'm going to use it for your grant period and other legitimate professional purposes after the grant period is over. If you're spending it personally or saving it, this will affect your net income, the amount that's left over after you've subtracted your business expenses. And I would beg you that just as employers withhold 35% of your salary paycheck in anticipation of your taxes, even more if you're delinquent in taxes or if you haven't been setting aside a similar amount, I would urge you, as you look at what you think will be net income from us, not set off by business expenses, that you mentally take 35% of that and put it somewhere where you can't touch it in anticipation of taxes. If your taxes come in at the end of the year and they're not that high, yahoo, that's found money. But we've seen too many people get themselves in deep financial and legal trouble by thinking, oh, I just got $20,000, I'm going to spend it all, not realizing that part of that is net income, and suddenly there's a tax bill for $5,000 or $6,000 and nothing to pay it with. And we don't want you to put yourself in that situation. So therefore, as you think about the schedule, let me just get through the three questions. The biggest question to ask yourself are, when will I have offsetting business expenses? How will the Jerome that earning piece of supported funds affect my total net income? And third and finally, how might this affect my potential taxes? Not only because of my burden, but also when you look at your total net income, our income might push you into a different tax bracket, and then your tax rate could shift. Yeah, Roger, did you have a question?
I just had a question about could you budget that? Could that be a part of your budget? Planning for net income and taxes, is that viable to add to your budget?
Well, if you've earned the time, again, we can't tell where you're going to spend it on. So if you say, I'm going to do $20,000 of time, you can in your own budget say, I'm putting $6,500 of that, I'm going to pay $6,500 taxes out of that 20, great. We can't, though, in that itemized budget, you can't say space, blah, 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 taxes.
Right. Got it.
The government won't, because that then is we're paying your taxes, not you paying your taxes, in a way. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, Brajani, did you have a question? Okay. I'm sorry, yes.
So you said whatever we spend, we have to wait until the grant starts? Should we start to collect receipts?
I would urge you, and the question is, we have to wait to spend until you sign the grant contract. Now, two things I want to make sure I'm clear about. It's the signing of the grant contract that then allows the expenses to be legitimate. So it's not the day you get your first check. You may say, I'm going to elect to wait to get my first check, so I don't have to wait for that. It's when I sign the contract. Should you keep receipts? I would say, if I were you, we will not ask you for receipts. You don't need to send them to us. The government, however, might decide, oh, we're going to audit you. And if the government audits you, they want to see receipts, and they want to see time, and they want to see how you've determined your time. So if I were you, I would make sure that I'm keeping receipts and I'm keeping a log of the time I'm spending and the value I place on the time. And that way, it's good discipline, first of all, but if you're audited, then you're ready. And if you don't have receipts when audits come along, then the government will say, well, if you can't prove it, it doesn't exist. Does anybody else watch Judge Judy? If you don't have the proof, it doesn't exist. I mean, that same sort of thing. If you don't have a receipt, the government will say it's not a legit cost and they'll consider it income. Any other questions? Yes, please.
I do. You're saying if we give you a budget for 20,000, and then you're saying we should set aside 35%. Is that how does that work?
If you're giving us the budget for 20,000, you've earned the time. Your 35% is your determination mentally of where you're going to spend the money.
So, but what if we want it for equipment sake?
If you're giving us a line item to budget all for those expenses, you cannot ask for time. But the reality is, those are business expenses that offset your income, so they don't become part of your net income. And it's the net income that the government's going to go after. The net is what you've got, which is what you keep after you spend your money on your business. And all of those costs and that cost should be on your business. Yep. Yeah, please. Patricia?
You said that, we should get the materials and the contract over as soon as we can, even though we don't know when we would, even if we don't want the money right away. But if we're not sure, say we're gonna have some business expense or travel or maybe other income coming in or whatever, I guess I'm wondering how much flexibility there is on the timing of things.
We're going to get to that in 10 seconds. That's going to be the next thing we're going to look at. So just hold that question, and then if I haven't answered it, we get through it, let me know. Yes, is that Jess?
Can I ask, in fear of like losing healthcare over this like new income I have, can I choose to like get a lower amount of like perhaps let's say like 18K versus 20 and then get more next year, like delay the stipend that way?
I need to check on that question. There is a provision in this grant structure that if we don't want anybody to lose their housing or their health care because they're getting too much. And it's the one exception to everybody's going to get the same amount. If you want to make the particular case to us about I need less this year because you're going to push me into bad territory and I'm going to lose things, we can do that. The question I will need to investigate further is, can we add that difference to the next year? I mean, you could say, I want 18 this year, and then I'll be happy to take the 20 the next year. I need to do more research before I can confidently say you can do 18 this year and 22 the year after. Eleanor, do you have something?
Is it on? I was just going to say, so there are actually 3 calendar years in which you can draw the funds. So 2019, 2020, and 2021.
Okay.
And we're going to get
maybe a way, and Ben is going to talk about that more, that you can divide it over the 3 calendar years so that it's not impacting your healthcare.
So let's go right there, because that's, again, a perfect segue. If you go on page 56 in your book, you're going to see a chart that looks like this. And I'm going to flip the slide, just page 56, and I'm going to slightly vary it here. First of all, you're going to receive directly a payment of $40,000 from us over a 2-year period. Because of our legal calendar, we have to spend our money between May 1st of one year and April 30th the next. Therefore, you're going to get the first $20,000 between May 1st of 2019 and April 1st of 2020. You will get the second $20,000 between May 1st of 2020 and April 30th or April 1st of 2021. Because, though, we realize that the government, for tax purposes, wants to look at the calendar year in which you receive the money, In each of the spending years, you have the option of receiving your funds in one annual lump or in 2 installments that will divide the funds over 2 tax years. So more specifically, on this first $20,000, you can receive all or part of your first $20,000 between May 1st and December 31st of this year, or you can wait and receive all or part of it between January 1st and April 1st, 2020. For the second $20,000, you can similarly say, I want all or just a part of it between May and December of 2020, or I want all or part of it between January and April 2021. And I'm going to run you through 3 fictitious scenarios to imagine this. So Jess, I'm actually going to pick on you. You gave me this perfect segue in. Let's imagine this is a great year for you. You've gotten several grants, you've got an adjunct teaching position, you've got a major exhibition coming up. You are going to have only a month when you think about my time to say that exhibition's coming up in November. I am already so committed, I can't really spend any time or energy on what this fellowship's offered me. So you might say, you know, I only want $5,000 before December 31st. Which will then mean I need to take the other $15,000 of my 20 between January 1st and April 1st of 2020. You then say, you know, I'm sick and tired of teaching, and all this exhibiting stuff is running me into the ground. All I want to do is spend time in the studio for the rest of the year. So please give me the entire $20,000 between May 1st and December 31st for the second 20, which means, of course, I would get nothing between January and April of 2021. This means that for tax purposes, your Jerome income for 2019 would be $5,000, your Jerome income for 2020 would be $35,000, and your Jerome income for 2021 would be 0.
Jess is amazed, by the way.
Yes.
As am I. Like, how did that happen?
I just articulated all your dreams. Yes. Okay, but let's imagine, for example, that Jasmine has a different life. So that, let's say, for example, Jasmine's looking down the road and saying, I'm in the middle of creating a work and it's not fully funded and I need cash now. I've got to pay collaborators, I need lighting designers, I got to score, I want it all. So give me the entire first $20,000 between May and December of 2019, which means that I get no additional cash between January and April. Jasmine may further say, unfortunately with this piece, I am booked solid on an international tour and I'm going to have so much money coming in 2020 that it's going to be a bumper year for me. And so I don't want any more money between May and December of 2020. But I don't have anything after 2020. I've fallen off the cliff. So give me the rest of my $20,000 between January and April of 2021. So this would mean that for her case, that she would have total Jerome income of $20,000 in 2019, 0 income in 2020, and an additional $20,000 in 2021. And now let me go to one more scenario. Finally, this one's for Ty. Ty basically says, look, I'm just going to write at a steady pace for the next 3 years. I'm not changing my job. I can't bank on other grants. I'm going to continue to teach and work on the side. But I think my income is going to be pretty consistent over the grant period. And I just really want to spend my time writing at a steady rate because I'm working on a 7-volume series that's going to win the Booker Prize. So, Ty basically says, please give me the first $13,333 of Jerome income between May and December of 2019, which means I'll have 2019 income in total from Jerome of $13,333. Meaning that now I have to take the remaining $6,667 before April 30th because of my first $20,000. Knowing I want to be steady, I will therefore ask for another $6,666 between May and December 2020, which will give me total Jerome income for the year of $13,333, which means that in 2021, I have the balance of my grant, which is $13,334 because $20,000 doesn't divide evenly by 3, and because of inflation. And so therefore we know that in total in 2021, I will have total Jerome income of $13,334. Now, these are just 3 fictitious random scenarios. I did not consult with the 3 fellows that I have just paraded in front of you. These are not your only options, but the common through lines are first $20,000 before April 2020 divided into up to 2 installments. Second, $20,000 between 2020 and 2021, again divisible in up to 2 installments. So before I go on to the next thing about what your plan looks like, So here's again, just the scenario. This is, when you go to submittable, this is not in your book, you'll see, for example, that it will say 2019 payment amount. So this is where you fill in $6,667. 2019 payment date, we'll get to that in a minute. And you want it on the payment date you dictate, and then we'll get to 2020 amounts exactly. But it's just an easy fill-in form for you, you'll get to with submittable. And that's your payment plan. That said, because we have to review these, yeah, sorry?
Just to take a breath there, I just wanted to say that,
Did I do it wrong? Just try talking again.
hello?
Oh, here. The bottom might be a little.
Sing out, Louise. For those of you who know musicals, this is like my,
Okay.
we play musical trivia. Gypsy is always the right answer in our office, no matter what.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to sing out and just say that the plan, the payment schedule, all of that, everything is through submittable. So if you're wondering, how do I get this to you? It's all through submittable.
And Andrew's going to do a presentation about that, about submittable a little later. So again, they're in your book or not. This form is not reproduced in your book, I don't think, unless it got added at the last minute. But Andrew again will go over submittable at the end.
And just one thing, the Excel, that page 59 that we've been referencing, there's a URL on, I think, page 60 that says, here's where you download a blank one. And that link to the blank one will also be available here as well. So we've got blank Excels for you to work from.
Before I take the next question, let me just, because this may be the question. First of all, two other things. We make payments monthly on the third Monday of each month. So if you want a payment on August 5th, you need to ask for a July payment because we're cutting the checks on the third Monday of the month. So anticipate if you need money outside of the subsequent month. The second thing to just basically say is we have to review these documents as well, and so there are deadlines. If you want all or any of your money before December 31st of 2019, we need your plan and your budget request no later than November 4th. Similarly, to get any of your $20,000, if you didn't ask for it in 2019, we need your plan and your request no later than January 31st of 2020. For the second $20,000, similarly, and we'll talk about this more in a minute about what the progress report is, to get any funds of your second $20,000 before December 31st of 2020, we need your progress report no later than November 2nd. And similarly, final deadline to get your second $20,000 is January 31st of 2021. And please remember, funds that are not requested by the deadline will be forfeited.
Is there a deadline?
Yeah, please, Carolyn.
Is there a deadline sheet in here?
Andrea, is there a deadline sheet in there?
There is. If you look on page 80, that'll list a bunch of key dates.
So page 80 will include this information.
And then it's also kind of contextually in the section about your plan and budget, there's some deadline notes there, but all the key dates that you'll want to keep in mind are on page 80.
Yes, Caroline.
So, okay, this might be a dumb question, but since we can't ask.
There are no dumb questions. We agreed to that.
Yeah.
Yes, all questions are welcome.
So let's say I don't really want any money this year anymore, but I start working on the plans this year anyway. That doesn't count as being supported by Jerome.
No, remember, when we get your plan and we generate the contract and you sign the grant contract, the clock begins to tick on things you can allow us to support.
Okay.
Now, even if you don't want money till several months later, I would say don't hold your plan back because you're just delaying the start of the clock. You know, so you don't need to, it's not when you get your first check, it's when you sign the grant agreement. Again, the one thing I would urge you though to be thoughtful about is if you're incurring costs in a year and not taking the check until after January 1st, you need to think through about what's that done for my offsetting business expenses versus my net income. I mean, you need to be thoughtful about that planning. But yeah, part of the reason we say get the stuff to us as soon as possible is so the clock can start. It doesn't mean you have to take money right away, but the clock can't start if we don't have a signed grant contract. Does that help? Yeah, is that Jess again, I think?
Yeah, so my question is, it says the deadline for the plan and budget is November 4th. If I submit like next week.
You can, if you're ready to submit next week, submit next week. Because we, and again, the staff will review and get back to you. We've already gotten multiple plans from the Minnesota group, and they met a week ago. So, but some others of you may say, I'm not nearly ready for this. Again, take the time you need. Just remember, if you want money this calendar year, we need to have those documents before November 4th. If we get them November 28th, we don't have time to turn around your paperwork, get your grant contract, get your direct deposit set up, all those things we've got to do. There's just not enough time. So, again, but when you're ready. Okay, I'm going to switch to reporting requirements. And this is going to be, again, to your earlier question about receipts, this is going to be a lot easier for you to think about if you've been keeping those records. Again, we're not going to ask for receipts. During the grant period, you're going to submit 2 reports to us, what we call a progress report and what we call a final report. Now, we've not finished these yet, so I don't have a visual image and they're not in your book. But that said, the progress report has 3 functions. First of all, it is your chance, it's your need to tell us, I'm still eligible. There are 3 conditions that could make you lose this grant. Number 1 is residency. Per our charter, you have to file your taxes either in New York City or in the state of Minnesota. And if you say, I'm moving to Arizona for the 2nd year, Godspeed, we're not going to ask you for the first year money back, but we can't support you if you're moving full-time to Arizona. You could move from New York to Minnesota, and many of us will welcome you with open arms, and especially when you hear the messages from your Minnesota colleagues, you will be all calling real estate agents in Minnesota to look for apartments right away, so that's okay. But you have to be in the 5 boroughs of New York or in Minnesota. And when I say 5 boroughs, we really mean it. No Poughkeepsie, no White Plains, no Maplewood, New Jersey, where I used to live. It's the 5 boroughs. So this is the point you tell us, yes, I'm still filing my taxes there. And part of the reason we draw that distinction is we understand, especially for some of you who are filmmakers or some of you who are dancers, you may be on location, and so you're actually spending more of the year out on location, you're spending more of the year out on the road. But the question is, when the government says, where's your legal residence and where are you filing your taxes, 5 boroughs of Minnesota. Second thing is, you could say basically, you could lose it is, you could say, this is just too hard. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to go back to med school. I'm going to go into religion. I just can't do this artist thing anymore. And again, great. We're sorry to lose you. Hail and good speed. We won't ask you for the first year back. We can't support you in the 2nd year to go to med school. And then the third thing is, this only supports people who are not in full-time degree-seeking programs. If you said, I'm going to go back full-time for an MFA, if you're in a full-time degree-seeking program, we can't support that 2nd year. Now that said, if any of this has changed, again, we can't offer you this status, but this is the time you really just tell us that again. Secondly, this is your moment to report on what you did with the first $20,000. And basically the questions we're going to ask fall into this ballpark of, okay, so what did you do? How did you spend your time in design and designated money? So again, the articulated cost if you had them. And did you use the MAP and or the Opportunity Fund? We're going to get to Opportunity Fund later. And that's basic. And what impact has this had on you? So yeah, I got interviewed by the paper, or yeah, I got, new presenters knew who I was, and suddenly I'm getting called, oh, wow, I got an agent. Whatever that is, we want to know about it. And third, this is the moment in the progress report that you tell us about the information about what you're going to do with the second $20,000. And at this moment, you can do one of 3 things. You can either say, I told you that at the outset, and nothing's changed. I filed a 2-year plan to begin with, and there's no change. I'm still in. Or you could say, I didn't tell you that 2nd year. I was one of those TBD people, and this is the moment I'm going to provide you all that. Or you could say, I gave you information, but that's changed. And that's either what I'm going to do is different or the payment schedule has changed, but this is the moment where I want to adjust what I had originally told you. If you're making changes to your plan, you'll simply file a new Part 2 of that budget form, and again, you'll have the opportunity of working with staff to recalibrate your scheduled payment.
Corinne, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Corinne, please.
Back to the last slide of the progress report. So,
This one? Yeah.
How did you spend the time in designated money? So if we do just do a full earning to 20,000?
How'd you spend your time? Again, the designated money is a reference to if you line itemed out equipment, space rental, if you line item those things out, then we need to see that, yeah, I told you I was gonna spend $3,400 on space rental, and it was actually $3,800, and therefore I underspent whatever. And again, we'll look at adjustments, but if you line itemed out, yeah. If you only did the time, how'd you spend your time? And again, we don't need to know where you spent it. Okay? Any other question on this? Ooh, we're getting there. Okay. Now, again, we need time to review these, to review your plan and complete our own paperwork. Therefore, if you want money from your second $20,000 in 2020, we need, if you want it in 2020, we need your progress report no later than, you can give it to us as early as possible, first of all. So if you finish the plan, just get it in, while your memory's fresh. It's like I did everything I was going to tell you about. Here it is. Or if it's taking you a lot longer, we want to hear from you 12 months after you got your first check. If you're saying this is taking me longer than 12 months to do, for whatever reason, that's fine. But we just need to know where you are. But again, if you want to receive funds from the second $20,000 in 2020, we need to see your progress report no later than November 2nd of 2020. And to claim any of the money from the second $20,000, we've got to have a progress report from you, no matter where you are, no later than January 31st of 2021. The final report is what you file after the second $20,000. And it asks a lot of the same things the progress report did. But it's what did you do since the first $20,000? How did you earn or spend money since the first $20,000? Did you participate in MAP or the Opportunity Fund since the first $20,000? Oops, there we go again. Were there any new events or impacts since the first $20,000? But we're also going to ask you to really stand back and say, when I look at the whole package for all my time with you, here are some recommendations for changes I would urge you to make in the program to be better for other people. Here's my sense of what it was like to work with Jerome. You may say, you guys were easy to work with, or it was the most painful thing I've ever been through in my life. But whatever you need to tell us to make us better. And then we're going to ask you to say, when the whole thing comes down for landing, what difference has this grant made for you? Just in the biggest sense. And that's your final report. The final report is due 12 months after your last payment. And these dates will be specified in your grant contracts. So just know that 12 months after your last payment, you're going to have to file that. And so again, in summary, you submit the plan, you sign the grant contract. After we approve it, you receive the first $20,000. You submit a progress report. You receive the second $20,000, and you submit your final report, and you are done. Until you submit the final report, we consider the grant technically open, and this is most relevant to filmmakers. As long as a grant is open, you cannot apply for a subsequent grant from us in the film project deadline if the deadline is after May 1st of 2021. So for a program that starts after that, until we get that final report, you're still hanging out with an open grant. This is everything pretty much to say about the $40,000 that's coming directly to you. This is all to you. And we've got one other topic, which is the Opportunity Fund, and then I'm going to thankfully shut up and you won't have to listen to me anymore. But before I do, any questions about this $40,000? Scheduling payments, your plan, your reports, whatever. Yes, please, Moz.
It's actually from the very, very first part of what you're talking about. I have a commission for something, and so I'm just trying to figure out that they're going to fly me out to this place to see this piece be performed, but in the meantime, I'd like to go check out the hall, see what it sounds like, and I'd like to check out the organ that they have there, maybe pay somebody to play the organ. Like, can I use these funds for that, even though it's a commission?
Yeah, the question, if people didn't hear it, is you have an existing commission that is paying you for some of your business expenses, but not all. And because, I'm just sort of summarizing. So they're bringing you out to hear the premiere, but you're interested in going out to see the hall earlier, meeting people earlier, and they're not paying for that. Can you use your funds for that? Absolutely, yes, you can use your funds for that. You absolutely can. As long as they're not paying for it, you can. And similarly, you may say, even with the commission, they're paying me $3,000 for the commission. And when I really do the math and realize this is costing me 26 weeks of time at a sort of half-time rate, this is the equivalent of $2.45 per hour. that's not a reasonable and defensible rate. What is really my time worth? And can you cover some of my creative time to write a piece? Again, we can cut the gap between what your commission is and what reasonable compensation would look like. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Do we like these answers so far? Yes, Patricia?
With these hypothetical LO breakdowns of
Yeah.
distribution funds, let's say we do ask for the 35,000 in 2020,
Yeah.
but then we get some windfall in 2020 and would like to delay that for 2021, even though because we're doing our contracts ahead of time and we're not able to predict. What kind of flexibility is there?
Again, in the progress report, you have the opportunity to say, you know, I originally told you I wanted 35,000 that calendar year, now I don't. Other money's come in the door, you know, and so really I only want 15,000 this year and then throw the other 20 entirely to next year. You can do that in the progress report to recalibrate it. The only advice, it would make our lives bookkeeping hell, and so I hope that you wouldn't do it. If you felt like you needed to refund money to us for whatever reason, then get it back. We'd have that conversation with you. But what you might think about is, I know I'm applying for a USA Artist Grant, and I know they announce in September, and I know that I think my chances are pretty good, and therefore, instead of asking for money in September, maybe I'm just gonna wait and ask for it in October, because by then I'll know. And of course, if the grant comes in September, you call us and say, wait, that October payment, no, something else came through. So you might just think about the timing within the year if you think there's a possibility that's likely, that there might be another sudden big infusion. But again, if we need to work with you to refund and whatever, we can deal with our auditors after the fact if we have to. Yes, Carrie?
The travel cost, does that apply to cast and crew as well, or is it just you?
The cast and crew costs, if you would be paying for that as part of your expense budget, that's a legitimate cost for you to create new work. That's part of your new creation budget, and you'd say for transportation, I'm asking for this, because it's multiple people, that's a legitimate business cost. Yeah. Now, again, you all should ask the tax people today about issuing 1099s to the people you work with and how you compensate those people and how you deal with their transportation, because I'm not a tax person, but you got that opportunity this afternoon.
Right.
Yep.
And you mentioned in career development, an agent. Would that be considered professional advisor?
An agent, for example, in the professional development, for some people you may say, look, I've just never had a chance to get an agent. I want to fly to New York and meet agents to get an agent.
Right.
Totally legit. If you even said, for example, as some people do, look, I'm doing a premiere of a new work in Albuquerque and nobody outside of Albuquerque, and I apologize, I know somebody here is from Albuquerque, so this is not, it's just front of mind right now. It's not, the people I want to see it, they're probably not going to get out there to see it, so part of my professional development I want to spend to actually bring people out to see the work, that's legit. Again, you need to be thinking about what's the impact this is going to be. And part of the interesting question you might ask yourself in that third bracket especially is, in addition to making work, I know I've got this grant for 2 years basically. In year 3, day 1, how's my life different? And it's just if I make more money, that's great. But is there some other way I want my life to be different? I'm better connected, I'm better networked, I've got more awareness of social media. There are a lot of things that if you really ask, how do I not want to be back in the same place? That's a moment you can begin to investigate those things. Yes, please, Adam.
With collaborations, we would just make a budget proposal for half of this budget.
I don't know. I don't remember what we determined about the collaborations, about if they request 10 and 10, or if they divvy the money, or if one person's the signator. Half. It's half. So each of you should, 10 to 10. Unless between you say basically, I mean, let's say, for example, that not all grant programs accept collaborative things, and so suddenly your brother's got a $25,000 grant coming in the same year, and it's to him. You could say, for the collaboration, we want to channel it all through you. Yep.
And if I was considering grad school, I should put it off for 2 years.
I'm sorry, say that again?
If I was considering grad school, I should put it off for 2 years.
If you're going back to grad school full-time, we need you to go through our money first before you go back for us. So, you know.
Full-time versus low residency?
So, versus what?
Well, low residency is a full-time. Yeah.
Say that, please. Did you hear?
I did.
Okay.
What was that question?
Full-time versus low residency,
Okay. Anything else? Yes, please. I can see the name tag. I'm so sorry, Kate. Thank you.
Say you're gonna have a lot of your expenses in a consolidated period, like if you're a filmmaker and would you recommend requesting them and then you just holding on to them until it's time to pay the people? Like, I guess if you're doing a film shoot in year 2, and
Yeah, I do, and I know exactly what you're saying. Everybody's situation is different, and of course, the question is, when am I going to get money out the door? If you say basically I'm paying the whole film crew in November, but I want the money in June, we're fine with that. If you want to hold it, that's fine. The discipline is not to start spending it away on other things and suddenly find that you've blown it, but that's okay. Also, you're going to want to remember those questions about, if I take it that some of the film crew's not going to be paid till February, that's a different year. That's going to be considered net income. What are my offsetting business expenses? But we don't have to time our payment to be just before you pay for those expenses, okay? Okay. I'm going to go now to the opportunity funds. And let me just say that on everything I've said before, and what I'm going to say now, is that as you find these questions when you're doing this, if you are in film and video, or if you're in visual arts, Lan is your point person, wherever I'm there's Lan. And if you're in the other 4 fields of dance, literature, music, or theater, Eleanor's your point person there. So just keep that in the back of your mind. And we've been joined happily by Mark Tribe, who's on our board of directors. Some of you may know Mark, the noted visual artist. So Mark, welcome. I'm sorry that I didn't see you before now, so great to have you here.
Just walked in, thanks.
Oh. Perfect. Okay, we're going to go to opportunity funds. And here, this is not money that will come to you. This is not money that will be taxable. This is not money you will issue a report for. This is not money you'll be formally signing a contract for. This is an entirely separate pot of money, and you got to think about it as different than everything I've said before. Everything else is to you. This is not to you. Now, I'm going to admit up front that this is the least clear area of the grant, and it's murky. And it was really inspired by our board's desire to help artists sort of punch past the kind of ceiling that can often happen when you're dealing with nonprofit partners or presenters or producers. And so really the intent of this is the Opportunity Fund is designed to help expand your work, first of all, the scale of your work, what you're creating, and or your relationship with a nonprofit organization with whom you are in dialogue or working with during the grant period. You've got to think about the Opportunity Fund as meeting costs that are above and beyond your core agreement of activities to which you normally would agree, but which they pay. This is not money to give them to undercut what they're paying you. Okay? So this isn't like, okay, I normally charge $10,000, but I can sneak you $1,500, so you're only going to have to pay $85. This is not that. This is about expanding, strengthening, going above and beyond. And so let's think about examples of what you might do. Well, the most obvious place is, a lot of people are going to want to apply this to production budgets. You and the producer or presenter have agreed to a specific budget. But now that you're getting closer, you think, I want to add an actor to the cast or a dancer. I need an additional day of tech rehearsal. I want to increase the set budget. I want to increase the fee for a book illustrator if you're a publisher, a writer. And yes, opportunity funds can pay for those things. Those are above and beyond what your core original agreement was. But in addition, it's not just about production. You might say, for example, Marjani is going to say, basically, I'm going to open a piece in New York, and then I'm going to tour it to Minneapolis. If I could have an intern from Minneapolis, from the university there, to be embedded in my rehearsals as I'm making the piece, she's going to be my ambassador and help really stimulate college attendance when I get to Minnesota. And yes, opportunity funds could pay for that intern to be embedded in your company. Kareem might say, I want to hold an interactive community workshop as part of research, and that's not in the original budget. Opportunity funds could help you do that community workshop. Patricia may say, I want it to be added additional stops in a book reading tour. I want to do a tour to new cities beyond what we've agreed to, and yes, we could pay for that. Or Shirley might want to convene a panel of prominent experts to talk about the topic of a film in conjunction with the premiere. Opportunity funds could pay for the honorarium for the panel, or food for hospitality, and more. Or Hasabi wants to place an ad in local publications about the upcoming exhibition, and these are ones the gallery doesn't usually use. Yes, opportunity funds could expand the marketing budget and more. In short, there are things you want to do that are not part of the original agreement or what your partner has agreed to, and you can not only say, I want to do this, but I can bring resources to the table to make it happen. Each fellowship allows the recipient, so each fellowship, not each individual, so for those of you, for the Khalils, this is per fellowship, allows you up to $10,000 in total over your 2-year grant to such opportunity. Whether you make one commitment of $10,000 to one group or up to 4 commitments, the one caveat is the minimum commitment you can make to any one group is $2,500. Okay, so at least 25, but you can do 1 or 2 or 3 or all 4. Opportunity funds can be used at organizations with whom your working agreement predates us. So you may already have a signed contract. You may be already, that commission is already underway. Now's the time though, even though you're coming on to us late, you can now go to that partner and say, look, here's some other stuff we want to do. There's an opportunity here to expand the music component of this. You can use opportunity funds even though it predates. Otherwise, opportunity funds can be discussed as you negotiate or move into new relationships going forward. We would just urge you, though, to frame these as conditional. So in other words, we do have to approve, and they do have to make legal requirements for us, and while it's unlikely, we might come back to you and say, we can't make a grant to this group. So if you're negotiating or in discussions, you should be saying, what's the core budget that we're good on? And then, but if we could find extra money, what else might we want to do? And think about that opportunity funding as if we could find extra money. So you're not baking it into the budget and it falls through and suddenly you're short. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. So yeah, please.
The money that goes to the nonprofit, this might be silly, but whatever. It doesn't have to be for expenditure necessarily. Like it can be like, I'm going to give a certain institution or school money, I can use their equipment, and it's like an exchange kind of thing, right? Does that make sense? Or does that have to be something that they have to spend money on?
It's an expense that your nonprofit partner would normally pay, not a production expense you would pay in making the work. That's part of your itemized budget here. But this is, you're going to a film festival, and they don't usually do panels, and you want to do something else. You want to, they usually meet in a very small social space. You want a bigger space because you want more people. These are things additional and growing, but it's meeting the expenses they would normally pay, not that you would pay in making the work. Does that help?
What if a nonprofit has like a piece of equipment I want to use that like I could just use, like they have facilities that I would normally have to pay for. They're not necessarily making an expenditure on their part, but it's like, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what your original agreement is. So in other words, if you've agreed that you're going to do a load-in and a rehearsal for 2 weeks, okay, that's in your core agreement. But if you say, boy, I need now a 3-week period and we didn't negotiate that 3rd week, that has cost to them. To give you those utilities, that's a cost. To sacrifice that income, that's a cost. You didn't agree to that, and it's a cost they would incur, then yes, you could. But again, it's a cost they would pay, not a cost that's in your core agreement. Let me give a couple of other points, and then we can come back to this. Other quick questions on this before? Yes, please. Jess.
Assuming they have to be national organizations, right? How about international, like charitable?
The question is international. We are restricted to giving money to organizations in the United States.
Okay.
So this only will apply to organizations in the U.S., unfortunately. We don't have that capacity. So again, sorry?
Can I just clarify like a more specific example? Like for instance, if I have a show planned in for like 2021, beyond January, but I've requested like before January. So would that budget still be approved?
Yes, the opportunity funds are on the same cycle as your other funds. Remember, we said the last payment could come in 2021. But you have till 2022, depending on your last payment, to actually complete the component of the plan. We have to get the money out by April of 2021. The question that you want to ask with the nonprofit partner is, in that time frame, what does that do to their books and their schedule? And that's something they would need to think about, and that's relevant.
Do you want to talk about the 501c in Minnesota and?
Yeah, it's what's coming next. So, bottom line on this is, the first thing you do is you have a conversation with the nonprofit. Once you've reached an agreement with the nonprofit about, yes, we've agreed, we're going to add a tech day, you contact us and you say, this is it's Abrons Art Center, we're adding a tech day, I want them to have $7,500, and here's your contact person. And you signal that to us, and then you are done. Everything that happens next happens by the nonprofit. So all you need to tell us is conversation, we're agreed, purpose, organization, amount, and the contact people. It's the nonprofit that will file the application, it's the nonprofit that will file the reports, it's the nonprofit that will sign the grant contract. You fill these steps and you're done. Again, the only reminder is you have to let us know about the money no later than January 31st of 2021. You do not need to spread this over $5,000 per cash. You can ask for the whole first $10,000 within the next 2 months. You can delay the whole $10,000 into the second year installment. That rhythm is up to you. But again, if we don't have a request for the money by January 31st of 2021, your portion is dissolved. And no, you cannot add this to your fellowship. You cannot say, gee, I didn't spend any of my $10,000, so can I make my $40,000 fellowship $50,000? Nice try. But the answer is no. So here are a few caveats about the organization. Number one is, this is intended for organizations either in Minnesota or the New York City to strengthen your relationship with them. If you have a special case, talk to staff and we'll talk it through. But the primary benefit of this really is, how are you developing richer relationships with your own community that are going to support you after we're done? And in line with that, you cannot give this money to your own organization or to an organization who's already paying you a salary. The third thing is, we are respectful of your time, and this will cost the organization time and energy and reporting and duplicating an effort. And in the same way we're respectful of your time, we want to be respectful of the organization's time. So the organization is entitled to 10% of the grant for their overhead. So if you're saying, I'm giving you $10,000, what you're really saying is, we have $9,000 to support the activity, and you get to keep $1,000 for your overhead. I'm giving you $2,500, you really have $2,250 for the project, but you're keeping $250 for your overhead. So in the same way we were respecting you, we're respecting them. And fourth and finally, again, remember, Jerome, not requested by January 31st or forfeited and won't be added to, and will not be added to your fellowship grant. And this opportunity fund, again, not in your book, but it's submittable. You'll see it basically says, what's in the first three boxes, the opportunity request is, what's the nonprofit's name, what are you going to do, what is the amount, and what are you going to do. This is the one sentence of, we're going to support an extra day of tech. And then there are three more boxes about who's the contact, what's their email, and what's their phone. That's all you have to file with us. Yeah, Kareem.
I just have a clarifying question.
Please.
Because the way you are, at least I'm hearing you describe how the funds can be used with an organization, it seems to be more like an add-on.
It's an add-on.
But, so can it be like the primary funds to directly fund like a workshop or a production? Or something like that?
If you have not agreed to that in your core agreement, again, you need to think about, what's my standard agreement with this organization. This is about, I mean, part of what this is really designed to do is not only to enhance the scale of what you're doing, but there's a subtle thing we're trying to do here to say, basically, how do we invest, this is going to sound really bad, a lot of your lives as organizations choose you and say, either we like you or we don't like you, and here comes the money. This is your chance to go back to the nonprofit and say, really, I'm bringing resources to the table. This is an opportunity. I'm choosing you to invest this money in as an organization. And there's something potentially subtle and rich about shifting that dynamic, even subtly, that this is designed to do. And if you're just afraid of their ongoing costs, they're just going to learn to hire you for cheaper. You know? I mean, I'm being real candid. So this is really designed to help just imagine the texture of that give and take a little differently. Yes, please, Caroline.
I'm reading the things on the back page of this is very helpful, but I have an additional question, which is, let's say you're presenting a piece of music and you're working with a venue that, let's say they have maybe they have $200 in the budget to give you for the performance as a band, which is low anyway, but can the money be used for you to get them to give you more money for the side people in your group or for the performance itself?
I would say basically, if you've agreed to a sort of substandard payment, your primary grant gives you the opportunity to say, I want to hire additional personnel and I want to do, my enumerated cost of collaborators, et cetera. That organization is not normally paying for it. This is a time for you and the organization to think, what can we do together that's bigger, that's richer, that's beyond what we've already agreed to? And for lack of a better description, you guys have already agreed that you're accepting $200 for these 5 musicians. So I would say basically that additional collaborator request actually can go easily. And we'll think about this more and have a discussion. I mean, it's a really interesting question. And so let us think about it. I don't have a concrete answer. I'm just relating to my instincts.
Right.
Yep.
One of the things here says I'm a jazz musician, so I went right to the one that's the jazz musician that says an additional side person and video projection are beyond the position's budget. So then opportunity funds would be requested to cover the side person and the videographer.
Yeah. So in other words, if you said, I'm going to Jazz Gallery and we're bringing a trio, and you're writing a new composition, you said, I realize now this is a vocal piece. I thought it was a trio piece with no vocalist, and I want to add a vocalist, and I want to add video projection, and that wasn't in the original agreement. Then yeah, we're expanding the scale of that. And you're not saying to the nonprofit, and you have to pay for that now. You're saying, if we can do this, I can bring resources to the table. So can we agree that we can, now they may say, we can't video it here. We have union agreements. There may be reasons they would say, but that's part of your conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, please, Todd.
So my question is similar, following up on like the one that says a fellow in literature, the one that you mentioned as well about adding a planned stop to a tour, or as an unplanned stop to a tour, and it says funds would be requested by the nonprofit on behalf of the fellow to support additional readings and travel. So if I want to go to, I don't know, the Literary Loft in Minneapolis, and because I'm still trying to figure, and they're like, well, we can't afford to bring you. So then I can say, well, I have funds. So, but then how does that work? Is then they get the money and then that's it? Or?
When you reach the agreement with the nonprofit and for the amount and the purpose, you tell us, and then everything else we'll deal with them. We'll contact the Loft if they're the partners on this and say, you ask us for a grant of $4,500 to bring Ty to Minneapolis to cover her a lodging and plane fare and an honorarium, and great. This is above and beyond whatever the agreement was, but the nonprofit will fill all that out. And we pay the nonprofit directly. The nonprofit, depending on what you've agreed to, pays you.
Gotcha.
Okay? I want to get to, I'm really conscious of time. I want to give Andrea a couple minutes to walk you through submittable.
We can do that after the break. We actually have that scheduled for after the break.
Okay.
Yep.
And where are we on time? We probably run over.
Like 2 to 3 minutes before we take a short break.
Okay, 2 to 3 minutes. So Jess, to you.
Yeah, so this question is more about like how, if I want to give an organization $2,500, but they're aware that I have a maximum allowance of $10K, so it's kind of awkward of being like, hey, I'm only giving you $2,500. So would Jerome Foundation be the initiator of this conversation regarding finances, or do we have to?
This is something we won't do. You guys need to do this. I would say the awkwardness on this, and we totally get it, is that some people may do that. My own take, if I were in that, would be simply either to say, I don't mean to be disrespectful, you guys. This is opportunities for us both. This isn't, anything. We should both be thankful for $1.95 additional. How hard pressed are. And part of the opportunity for me as a grantee is to be able to make stronger relationships, not just with you, but with 4 different organizations. And so this $2,500 isn't reflective of the value I place on you. It's more reflective of how this grant can serve me to have multiple tentacles into the community. I mean, if I were having a conversation, that's how I might approach it. Similarly, if you go to one, that, they're gonna think like, oh dear God, you know, for whatever, think that you hung the moon or whatever, and that's your choice to do. Yep. Yeah, please, Marjani, and then Carrie, yeah.
I'm in conversations with an organization in Minnesota, and
What a wise place to be in conversation.
and part of our part of the idea is to basically broker a relationship with a partnership with a larger institution, and their hesitancy with that partnership is this idea of kind of getting swallowed up. And so, but part of my intent with the work is to broker these relationships for large institutions to connect with smaller organizations who are more effective in communities because they can be smaller and nimble. Would this opportunity fund support or help to sort of, for lack of a better word, like oil that machine in some kind of way, or create incentive, or I guess I don't know.
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that probably you'll want to talk to with Eleanor more about what the mechanics of that would be. I mean, I would say two things about it. One is, as you think about this just from this preliminary description, one is you might want to make a conscious decision about what organization gets the money. You might, I mean, again, we have to give it to a nonprofit organization, and if you're working with a group that's so small they don't have their nonprofit status yet.
Oh, no.
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes that happens for us, you know, they're so new, they haven't gotten their tax, then it has to go to the other organization. Otherwise, you may think about, no, I deliberately want it to go to the smaller one, or no, I want it to split it between the two, you know, but there are ways to think about that, but I think it's probably a deeper conversation that Eleanor will really guide you about what that might look like.
Okay.
Yep. I'm drawing your attention before the break to 3 additional documents you're going to find in tab 2. The grant contract is on pages 63 to 66. This is our boilerplate contract. I'm calling it out to you now because if you have questions or concerns with the conditions or requirements, it's just going to make things go a lot faster if you initiate that conversation before you get the plan in and you're trying to get something done quickly with us. So if you look at that contract and you say, this really gives me, even before your plan comes in, we can have that conversation. It's just going to make it faster. Your own grant contract will use basically this boilerplate language, but we'll fill in your particular reporting dates, but the bulk of the language won't change unless you press back. The second thing is while I've said we don't have progress or final report forms yet, on pages 67 to 70, you'll see teaser questions that might just be in the back of your mind as you think about this in anticipation. And then the third thing is on page 73, there is a fact sheet about the Opportunity Fund, which if you want to share with the nonprofit, you can, and we're going to provide, at your request, a redacted version of that. So you'll see on the top line, it mentions the $10,000. Precisely just to your point, I can provide a version of that with no dollar amount alluded to at all. Precisely for that reason about if you're coming to say, I've got 2,500, they go, wait a minute, there's 10,000 here. So we can give you a version that doesn't reference the 10,000 total. You guys have been incredibly generous with your time.
Carrie, you had a question.
I'm so sorry, Carrie. I did.
Right.
Okay. And Glenda Lease and Gia, I'm really sorry. I've been looking this way, and if you guys have had questions, I haven't seen them, and I'm mortified. But I want to give, and not to mention, even though I think you and your brother are talking shorthand across the chasm. So if you all have questions, please. And we're all here. We're here available during lunch to answer other questions. And thank you.
That's great. Now take a deep breath for Ben. Ready?